The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101. We're so happy you joined us this week. Over the next hour, you'll learn the tips, tricks, and vital information that will help you keep yourself confident and safe. Now, here's your host, Susan Bartlestone.
Welcome to Crime Prevention 101, the personal safety radio show with an optimistic perspective on a sober subject. I'm your host, Susan Bartlestone, and I am so glad that you've joined me today. As always, it is my great privilege to spend the next hour with you, helping you keep yourself safe. Now, I've got two topics for you today that I think you'll find out of the ordinary and hopefully thought-provoking. They both captured my interest immensely. In the first segment, I'm going to be discussing the newly passed amendment sponsored by freshman Senator Al Franken, who is a Democrat from Minnesota, which states that the government can withhold defense contracts from independent companies working in Iraq or other overseas areas, companies like Halliburton and KBR and Blackwater, for example, if these companies force their employers to submit to arbitration instead of being able to criminally prosecute any serious offenses like sexual assault, battery, and discrimination. Now, this amendment was spurred by the story of Jamie Lee Jones, a woman working for Halliburton KBR in Baghdad, and who in 2005 was gang raped by her coworkers, locked in a shipping container for 24 hours without food or water or a bed or anything, and warned that if she left Iraq for medical treatment, she'd be fired. Jones was prevented from bringing criminal charges in court against KBR and against the co-workers at the time of the assault because her employment contract stipulated that sexual assault allegations would only be heard in private arbitrations. And her story isn't an isolated one, as you'll see. And helping me out with this discussion is Jay Grace, who is the co-host of the Rape Declaration Forum show, on WBAI 99.5 FM out of New York City, who had the occasion to speak with another sexual assault victim working in Iraq for Halliburton. And you're going to hear her story actually in her own words. And in the second segment, this concerns the growing threat of terrorist assaults on synagogues and churches, and the lengths that some religious leaders are going to ensure the safety of their congregation. And my guest in that segment is martial arts master and rabbinic intern Stuart Shimon Rosenberg. And he and a group of other rabbis and pastors have been called things like the God Squad, the Rambo Rabbis, the Mazel Toughs, and the Shul of Hard Knocks. But hyperbole aside, they formed what they call the Tzaddik Task Force on Counterterrorism. They claim self-defense has a biblical basis and argue that you can't be spiritual if you're dead. And they are training other rabbis and other congregations in self-defense. So I think I've got a fascinating show for you today. So if you know someone who should be listening who might not be, please send out a text message about us, send an IM, start tweeting if you're on Twitter, anything so that they can join us too. All right, so let's start off talking about the Franken Amendment to the Department of Defense Appropriation Acts of 2010, which just passed in the Senate, that says defense contracts can be withheld from private companies if they require a mandatory arbitration clause which permits employees from taking cases like sexual assault, battery, and discrimination for criminal prosecution. Now, let me introduce my guest, Jay Grace, today. Jay Grace, 10 years ago, Jay was the victim of a brutal rape, and it took years of struggle for her to make the transition from seeing herself as a rape victim to survivor to thriver. For the past 5 years, she's co-hosted the Rape Declaration Forum show on WBAI Radio 99.5 FM, which is based in New York and streams on the Internet. And she also hosts and produces her own daily variety show, Jay Grace Live, on NewYorkTalkRadio.net. Hi, Grace. Hi, Jay.
Hello. Hi, Susan. Thank you for having me.
What a pleasure to have you back again. And for my new listeners to the show, I actually have done 2 shows with the co-hosts, Jay Grace and Rebecca Miles, from the Rape Declaration Forum. I'm actually going to link them in the show notes because they're great shows. Talk a little bit about the Rape Declaration Forum radio show, and then we'll talk about Tracy Barker's case.
Sure. It was conceived that the actual concept of the show about 5 years ago, like you said. It's basically a forum where survivors of sexual assault, rape, can just talk about what happened without any judgment, just telling their stories. It's live, so we can have callers call in and tell their stories as well. It's a way of healing. It's a way of being empowered, and we're very proud of this show.
It's a great show, and it was so fantastic to have you guys on my show. Now, one of the callers that called in, right, was a woman named Tracy Barker, and
yes, we actually had her interviewed. She actually was one of the people that we highlighted and had interviewed before they even. She wasn't a caller; she was actually a guest.
I see. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And just to give a little bit of background about her case. She worked for Halliburton in Iraq.
She was in Iraq, and she was sexually assaulted. And when she tried to get help, when she tried to report it, from our understanding, and you're going to have a clip as well so people can hear her own words. Basically, they told her that she cannot file any criminal charges. If she had any problems, she can report it and have it through arbitration, if at all. And it took her forever. And you'll get a sense of what happened to her from her own words, where they basically were trying to keep her from making any kind of charges whatsoever, whether criminal or otherwise.
Now hers is a very complicated case, and
it is.
Jay, when I was doing my research for this story, and as I said, she's not a Tracy Barker, Jamie Lee Jones. There's a whole bunch of these stories that are coming out there now. Evidently, there was absolutely no overseeing what was going on for those employees that were once they were outside of the United States. Halliburton, KBR, those camps that they have them living in, and they were living in like tin shacks or something like that. Their conditions were not very good conditions to live, from what I understand. Horrible conditions, rampant sexual assault and sexual harassment, and all kinds of things. And Tracy was very vocal about that, and that kind of did not endear her to the people.
No, absolutely not. Yes, definitely. I believe that unfortunately, because they had leeway, because it's foreign soil, there were no laws that, even though you're an American citizen and you would think that you were being contracted by the United States, that somehow you would be protected. But what they found out is that when something did occur, they really were not able to get anyone to stand up for them and make them accountable.
Right, and the conditions there are just horrendous. And she alleges that she was subjected to an attempted rape first, by a foreign national, a man who worked for the State Department, and then she was actually raped by a Halliburton employee. And according to Tracy, the State Department employee could absolutely do anything they wanted on foreign soil. There's absolutely no prosecution of it.
Yeah, they're Halliburton. They have immunity.
They have immunity, but now the Halliburton, the rape by the Halliburton employee, she was able to go to arbitration. So why don't we listen to the clip right now? It's a long clip. We may actually have to cut some of it, but I will post the whole clip on the show notes if we do have to cut. So Randy, let's run the clip.
Then the assault of the State Department employee took place where I was eating in a dining facility, and Ali Makhtari came in, and he was eating dinner. And I had only talked to this guy one time previous, and he was giving everybody information about a new project that was going to Australia with the State Department where you could take your family, and he said whoever has husbands or wives that are in the Army, here's the information. And my husband was debating on retiring, in the next year or two, so that's about the only time I talked to him. Mm. And I was working in billeting, and I was on call. Me and my coworker would be on call every other night, 24 hours. So he had told me he had a faulty air condition and wanted to know if I could put in a work order form, which is, where someone can come and fix it. Yeah. So after I got done eating dinner, I followed him to his living container and went inside, and he wanted to tell me about the war. And he said, I want to tell you a story about the Sunni and Shiites and why, they're fighting for the same thing, and they're just on different sides. And I asked about his air condition, and he said it was fine for right now. And he poured some alcohol drinks and tried to get me to have a drink with him, and I declined because not only do I hardly ever drink, but I was working. Mm. And he then started telling me about a woman in Saudi Arabia that had been raped, that he knew a woman that had been raped repeatedly. And she reported it, and eventually they found her dead. And after he told me that, Ali Makhtari lunged at me and started attacking me. He put his arm around me while he was trying to rip my shirt off, and we were fighting and struggling. I had my hand between his mouth and my mouth, and he was talking in Arabic. We fought. He had his arm around me like a chokehold, and we fought for quite a while, and I got away. And he stepped to the side as if I can, leave. And as I was leaving, he grabbed me again. And we struggled for quite some time, but he was trying to rape me, and he was sexually assaulting me. And when I went to try to leave, the door was locked from the inside, and I started crying, and he opened the door to let me out after we had fought for quite some time, and followed me, talking in Arabic. And we ran into a coworker, and he said something to her in Arabic, or actually in Farsi, and she responded, and he walked away, and she said that he had threatened me, and he was a very powerful man. And I went to the living container, and for about 3 minutes, and I was crying and pacing back and forth. I couldn't believe what had happened to me. And I had got a list to find out where our security was living at, because it was nighttime now and everybody was back in their trailers. And I went to the security and I reported it to a guy named Tony Davinsky, who took a report. We could not find the camp manager at the time, but the camp manager was probably the last person I wanted to talk to about it anyway.
Yeah.
I filled out a report, and I went back to a living container, and my roommate at the time was doing training in Kuwait. So I was there alone, and during that time, our generators went out that night. And so I spent the evening alone and afraid with no air and in the dark for several hours. That was a pretty scary part for me, because I didn't know what he had threatened, and the fact that I had just been sexually assaulted, I, didn't know what to do. The following morning, Tony Davinsky came and got me from my trailer and took me to the camp manager to report what had happened, and the camp manager took me over to the RSO investigator, Brian Hathaway, to report what had happened. And I was ordered to the living container again, not allowed to call anybody. I was denied medical attention. I was not allowed to call home. I was having panic attacks. I was crying. My legs were starting to hurt from anxiety. I wanted to talk to a female, and the State Department as well as Halliburton declined my request to talk to a doctor. All they had was a male EMT on the camp, and they told me that I could not talk to anybody and that I could not leave or use the phone. So I was once again put under what they call house arrest, or where you're not allowed to go anywhere, where you're confined to the container. And I was told to wait until they do an investigation, but I needed medical attention really bad, and they denied it.
What was the medical attention you needed?
Because I had been assaulted, and I didn't know what was going on with me or how I was feeling.
Right.
And I was having uncontrollable crying, and I was afraid. I was alone, and when the sun went down, it got worse because I didn't know what this guy threatened of me. He worked for the ambassador, and I didn't know what he was going to do to me. And again, I felt like I was being treated like a criminal, like I was being locked away again. And instead of getting medical attention and being able to talk to somebody about what happened, after several days, Brian Hathaway came to me and said that he had contacted Virginia, the State Department, to find out how to conduct this investigation that he has never done, and that they wanted me to go into the dining facility at lunchtime at noon and wear the same clothes I was wearing when I was assaulted so that he can see how men reacted to me. After he took my shirt that I was wearing to take pictures to send to Virginia to see, is this the kind of shirt that would attempt somebody to rape them? That's what he was sending the pictures for.
Great.
And then and their answer was no. And then, well, why don't we have her wear this into the dining facility so that we can see what she looks like and watch how the men look at her to see if she is an attempt to somebody who would rape her or who would sexually assault her. And so I was told to wear the same clothes, and I walked in, and it was humiliating. The RSO investigator was watching see how men were looking at me and reacting to me. I felt re-victimized as I was going through this dining facility. Why would it be my fault, or why would I have to walk through there wearing the same clothes? So I did what they told me to do. I was then still not allowed to call my husband, who was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I borrowed a cell phone from a soldier. His name is Kevin Rogers. He's with the National Guard. I called my husband and I told him what had happened to me. I told him that a State Department employee tried to rape me and that they would not let me leave. They would not let me talk to a female or a doctor. They would not let me call anybody. At one point I tried to use the phone booth and the camp manager was outside of the phone booth and would not let me talk to anybody and was pacing back and forth threatening me. And Kevin Rogers, the National Guard, saw him doing that, so he let me borrow his cell phone and asked if I needed some help. I called my husband back at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and his name's Galen Barker, and I told him what had happened. He was then trying to get to Kuwait so that he can go into Iraq and get me out of Iraq. He was trying to get to Kuwait. He had friends that worked contracting for Blackwater and was trying to figure out his own way of getting me out of Iraq. I told him that he knew that I was left at a staging area, and I was trying to still, at this point, get to HR to report that they left me at a staging area. They left me with no PPE gear. The sexual harassment, the sexual assault, I was pretty much confined to the camp. I was not allowed to leave or talk to anybody, and after the assault, it got worse. The investigation, they told me that they had spoken to Ali Mukhtari and that he admitted to assaulting me, and that he was going to be prosecuted and his security clearance was going to be taken away, was what I was told by Brian Hathaway. They had me type up a statement on the camp manager that was sexually harassing me, his computer, and I haven't seen that statement until recently. But they denied me medical attention. I was having some kind of breakdowns, anxiety attacks, and like I said, the nighttime, we had a few nights with no lights on the whole entire camp with incoming bombs, and it was scary. I was then informed that there was a doctor that was stranded on our camp, and his name is Dr. David Pakel. He works for the State Department. He is a psychiatrist, psychologist, and he's in that field, and he ended up at our camp by an accident. And I was told that, that they were going to try to get me over there to talk to him. And this was a medic who had set up this meeting with Dr. Pakel. When I met with him, I was hysterical about the assault and the continued abuse and sexual harassment by the camp manager. He kept knocking on my door and telling me that I had to sleep with him if I wanted to feel safe and if I wanted to leave, and I was still trying to deal with the assault by Ali Mukhtari. When I talked to Dr. Pakel, Halliburton was still refusing to let me leave. He wanted to take me on emergency medical leave and wanted to take me out of Basra. Dr. Pakel should have been on a flight out of there, but Halliburton were not authorized to fly, so we have to convoy. And Dr. Pakel chose to stay behind until I was out on a convoy with him. He refused to leave without me. So we were waiting for the security to okay for the convoy to go, and I had packed all my stuff because we were moving housing area anyway, but also because I was trying to get out of there for medical leave. And Dr. Pakel told me that we were leaving the next morning. And I had gone to the medics. I had to get some IV fluid for dehydration because I had not been to the dining facility or anything like that. And I was given some medicine for what they say, to help you sleep.
Mm.
And I went back to the living container, and I packed my stuff, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up, the camp manager was on top of me, and he was having sex with me. And when I came to, I started crying and screaming, and he kept asking me, why are you crying? And I was crying so bad that he stopped having sex with me and left. I had about an hour before the convoy was going to leave, and I didn't have anywhere to go. Halliburton had no human resource department or anything at all in the camp, which I think should be highly required by every camp. I went to Dr. Pakel and told him what had happened, and he took me out of Basra and took me to Kuwait to Rick Hopper, who is the human resource manager for Halliburton. I reported it with Rick Hopper for several hours and was told to go to the medics, and I thought they were going to do some kind of kit or some kind of examination, and instead they gave me a slip and said that I was on medical leave. And at that time, the camp manager was calling all over Kuwait looking for me. All these coworkers were telling me that he was coming there and he was trying to hunt me down. I was then taken in to the airport. About 3-4 years ago, the MEJA, the Military Extra Territorial Jurisdiction Act, they tried to pass that law, and a gentleman here in North Carolina, I don't recall his name right now, but he tried to pass that law, and a couple of people from Congress turned it down. And now, with all the assaults and rapes coming up in the media, they're trying to get the MEJA active now because there is no laws. If you go over there as a State Department employee and you assault somebody, rape somebody, kill somebody, there's no law. So what they do is they apply for a certificate of scope of practice saying that they're employed while they were assaulting people, and they get immunity. And the State Department is government, and you cannot sue the government on foreign soil. So where's justice?
Right.
So what needs to happen, and I'm hoping to do this through Congress, is to amend the Federal Tort Claims Act that deals with the issues that I'm facing because of the Federal Tort Claims Act. The way that it's worded right now, there's no justice for anybody who has been assaulted or a crime's been committed against by a government employee. So they claim they're not responsible, and they say, although our employee, recently Ali Mkhtari had applied for certificate for scope of practice. He wants a certificate that says that he was working when he assaulted me. And it's taken almost close to 3 years. I still don't know, after 3 years, who declined prosecution and why he has not been prosecuted. The State Department will not answer me why. Congressman Bob Etheridge in North Carolina has written many letters to the Attorney General asking why they will not prosecute, and they have ignored us and ignored me for 3 years. The victims' rights, we wrote them. They basically told me to go away. They will not answer anything at all in the investigation. They sent us some papers that says unclassified with a bunch of whited out sections. The Attorney General declined Ali Mkhtari's request. He wanted a certification of scope of practice, which means the government's responsible because he was working when he was assaulting me, which you can't sue the government. He wants that certificate because if he gets that certificate, then he has immunity on any action.
Is he still working for the State Department?
He is. He's actually working in D.C.
Wow. Isn't that something? Jay, I bet it's amazing to hear it again after all this time. It's quite a story.
And to think that, this is something that has been going on for a while, and I guess thank goodness for Al Franken's amendment, that at least now in the future, people like Tracy wouldn't have to go through what she went through.
Exactly.
But they have an option.
And I did speak to her this morning, and she did win in arbitration. But she was not going to be able to prosecute criminally if she wanted to. But hopefully, others will have that option in the future. So, Jay, thank you so much for being with me today. Everyone, make sure to check out the Rape Declaration Forum. It's www.wbai.org. When we come back, we're going to be talking with the God Squad about the need for self-defense in religious institutions. Oy vey.
News, opinion, your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com. After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartlestone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information. Streaming live, the leader in Internet Talk Radio, VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone. Susan would like to remind you that no absolutes exist in a crime scenario, and no advice can possibly address every variable. Each situation should be evaluated individually and responded to in a way you instinctively judge best. It's Susan's aim on this show to provide you with the information and options that will help you make that instinctive assessment quickly and safely. And if you're already a survivor of the kind of crime we're talking about on the show today, or any other crime for that matter, please remember that there are no right or wrong responses in a criminal encounter, and nothing that happened to you was your fault. Even if you think you used bad judgment in a situation and left yourself vulnerable, that's never an excuse for a crime or for violence. So please, call yourself a survivor, not a victim, and understand that with time, distance, and the proper professional help, you can put what happened into perspective and get on with your life. If you'd like to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, send your comments to solutions@fightsafe.com, and Susan may address some of them on future shows. That email address again, solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101.
This is Crime Prevention 101. Thanks for tuning in today. And don't forget that we also have a website, crimeprevention101.com, where you can look at the show notes, see pictures of my guests. I've got all sorts of resources and articles that we talk about in the show. You can also get on my mailing list there, so you never have to miss a single show. All right, now, the second part of the show, we're going to talk about something that happened a while ago, last May, as a matter of fact, 2009. 4 men who were described by the FBI as domestic terrorists were arrested for the attempted bombing of 2 Bronx synagogues. That's right here in New York. And this plot had been closely watched by the FBI for more than a year. My next guest points to this latest incident as an example of why synagogues are natural targets. And a group of rabbis headed by former NYPD officer and Rabbi Gary Moskowitz and my next guest, Stuart Rosenberg, who is a rabbinic student, a rabbinic intern. They formed what they call the SADC Task Force on Counterterrorism, and Stuart's going to tell me if I pronounce that right. And a part of that, I understand, is also controversial clergyman Pastor Ken Pagano from the New Bethel Church in Louisville, Kentucky, who's been making all sorts of news lately because he advocates that parishioners should bring guns to church for self-defense. And anyway, this group, all of them have law enforcement, military, or high-level martial arts skills, and they have been teaching self-defense classes to rabbis and congregation members. The group believes that clergy needs to take a stand and lead the way in the defense of their flock. We're going to talk about this course that they developed. Stuart Rosenberg,
yes,
welcome to Crime Prevention 101.
Thank you, Susan. It's a pleasure to be here and help out the best I can.
Now, you are a martial artist for many years, correct?
Correct. I have a martial arts background just over 30 years right now. I'm a 7th degree black belt in Shimo Hapkido, a reality-based self-defense instructor, and a weapons expert.
And you are based in New Jersey?
Yeah, we're based in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is right near Philadelphia, about 15 minutes away from Philadelphia, for reference.
Gosh, I wish you were a little closer to me. I would love to come down there and train. But in any event, Rabbi Moskowitz has said that self-defense is part of the Torah. And he quotes Deuteronomy 4:9-10, saying, guard yourself and guard your soul very carefully. And I understand that you also said learning self-defense and self-protection is a religious requirement.
Yes,
let's talk about this divine directive, as you're saying.
Well, we believe basically based on the Torah and some other teachings in Judaism, based on the Talmud and some of our greatest rabbinic scholars over the centuries, that it starts with guard yourself and guard your soul very carefully, which is the passage you mentioned from Deuteronomy. So that's part of our commandment, that keeping our body healthy is the foundation to keeping the commandments, that we can't serve God, serve the community, serve and help ourselves or help other people without keeping our health.
Yeah, and you also said it's very hard to be spiritual if you're dead, which is actually an excellent point.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek expression, but it kind of makes the point clear that self-defense is not mentioned per se in the Bible. It just says guard your soul and guard yourself very carefully. But part of guarding yourself is what we believe is self-defense. We go to the doctor to defend ourselves against a sickness, a cold, a flu, God forbid, anything worse, cancer, heart disease, high blood pressure. But what about walking down the street if someone wants to attack you? That's also taking care of your body and your soul. So this is where we believe that it's a religious obligation to learn self-defense as well.
How do other rabbis respond to this sort of interpretation of Deuteronomy?
Most everybody agrees. It's not the classical definition of the passage in the sense that we were talking more in the spiritual sense, but many of our great rabbis you probably heard, or many people have heard of Maimonides, a great scholar in the 12th century who was known as a doctor, a great doctor. He was a doctor to the Sultan one of the sultans in Spain, and basically that he talks in his whole tractate. He has a whole volume full of how you eat, how you exercise, how you take care of your body, all bodily functions, how that should behave, how you should take care of bodily functions and diseases. And we believe that most rabbis I spoke to and most clergy I've spoken to and Rabbi Moskowitz really believe in the idea of self-defense, but sometimes they have a hard time of actually practically carrying it out. So they know about the spiritual aspect because that's mostly what rabbis do, but there's very few rabbis out there who are teaching self-defense.
Self-defense, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you guys are, I would say you're pretty unique with that. And you are a rabbinic intern. And just talk a little bit about what that is.
Well, basically, I'm in rabbinical school. Rabbi Moskowitz has a small yeshiva. Yeshiva is a place that teaches, that educates rabbis. So in that school, we study some self-defense. We mostly study, I don't study self-defense in this school with Rabbi Moskowitz only because I'm a self-defense instructor for many years, but we study what the connection is between self-defense and Torah for one, but then we study all the classic, biblical studies that any rabbi would study to lead to ordination.
And how many other members of they've been called the God Squad. How many other members are there? Did I pronounce that right, by the way? It's Sadek?
Yeah, one of the newspapers, I forget who it was, Fox or CBS, named us the God Squad. We didn't name ourselves the God Squad, but that's okay.
And I didn't think you did.
Yeah. There's a bunch of members. I have myself. We have Rabbi Moskowitz, who was the founder. We have David Goldenberg. He was 20-year former police officer, retired in New York City. He was also anti-terrorist and SWAT team trainer. We have, you mentioned Kenneth Pastor, Rabbi Ken Pastor from Louisiana.
Pagano, Pastor Pagano.
Pastor Pagano, I'm sorry. We have a Dr. Michael Willett. Pardon?
Pastor Pagano, by the way, when he said something very interesting. He said, how do you respond to people when they say you should leave the protection of the synagogues to the police? And he said, we all know the police are great, but they usually don't come until after the fact. That's why we carry guns, because we can't carry police officers.
Yeah, that was a great saying. We all thought it was pretty funny, but also very true. The idea that the police, we all know, I think this is common sense, that everybody knows the police come after the fact. I don't know, very rarely does a police stop a robbery, does a policeman stop a mugging, does a policeman stop a rape in progress. Usually that happens after the fact, when they come around and take the report and take it to the hospital. And it's true, we can't have every human being can't have a guard walking with them, but then it goes back to the Torah passage, guard ourselves and guard our being. How do we do that? So we're saying that we have to do that by being proactive, and that's part of being... And
that is a good point. The police can only come after there's been a problem. They are not there to prevent it. All right, you know what, Stuart? Hold on. We're going to come back and talk more about the Shul of Hard Knocks in just a few seconds. This is Crime Prevention 101.
Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787.
That's it.
VoiceAmerica.com.
After more than 17 years' experience teaching safety skills to thousands of women and men, crime prevention and personal safety expert Susan Bartlestone concluded that by thinking and responding quickly, ideally within 20 seconds, potentially violent criminal encounters can be prevented. Using techniques from many different disciplines and illustrated by 60 real-life examples and success stories, Susan shows how it's done in her new book, Think Fast and Prevent a Violent Crime: How to Respond to Danger in 20 Seconds or Less. Check out www.crimeprevention101.com for more information.
The Internet's number one talk station. Number one talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone. We invite you to share your stories, tips, or suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover, and Susan will address some of these on future shows. Send your story or idea to solutions@fightsafe.com. That email address again is solutions@fightsafe.com. Now, back to Crime Prevention 101 with Susan Bartlestone.
This is Susan Bartlestone. Don't forget, Crime Prevention 101 is available on iTunes, so you don't even have to be at your computer to listen. I've been talking with Stuart Rosenberg, who is one of the members of the so-called God Squad. This is a name that the papers, the media gave him, and you can get more information about the anti-terrorist task force. Stuart, give me a website or a number.
I'll be glad to. I have a couple websites. You can link up through my martial arts school, which is streetsafeconcepts.com, streetsafeconcepts.com. I can also be reached directly at area code 856-380-1999.
Great, and I'm going to have those links also in the show notes and on my crimeprevention101.com website, so you'll be able to find Stuart and the God Squad very easily. Now, let's talk about how many religious institutions have you trained so far, and where are they?
We're working with a few, basically, we're in negotiations with a few. Since we just came out in August, we've had it with this, basically. We've had a great response, and there's a few people. There's a Florida one, there's one in California, there's one in Canada even, and several in New York, even a couple of Hindu mosques, I guess you might call them, or Hindu synagogues. They've all called to show interest in our program, and we're basically trying to tailor programs out with people and see what they're interested in and what level of training they want to get into. But our minimum course starts at 100 hours.
Oh, I thought it was 50 hours.
I'm not sure where you saw that one.
One of the
our main course is 100-hour and then a 100-hour instructor course.
That's interesting. And who do you train? And what? Tell me a little bit about what is in the course.
Sure. Well, the course is number one. It's called Combat Shooting and Apprehension, and what we do in there is we sort of incorporate something that a lot of people haven't done before. We incorporate what we call combat shooting with apprehension. Apprehension is more in the line of actual hand-to-hand combat, self-defense, close quarters combat, third-party protection, defense against weapons, defense against guns, whether it be knives, sticks, batons, chains, and then, again, third-party protection, because if you're attacked, sometimes you have to defend somebody who doesn't know how to defend themselves, who are standing next to you. It could be your wife, it could be a kid, it could be a parishioner, or somebody, a member of the church or synagogue, or multiple members of churches and synagogues. So we try to set these up. Our goal is to set them up in the individual churches and synagogues, so we can go out and basically teach people how to secure their own premise and do defense within their buildings, because each building's a little bit different.
So that means that you are training now, is this the rabbis and the senior congregation members, or anyone who wants to do it? And you're teaching them to shoot and to do takedowns?
We want to basically get a volunteer squad. We call a squad of first responders. So if there's a group of people who are in a synagogue, for example, and let's say there's half a dozen people who want to join this course, so it really doesn't have to be even the rabbi of the synagogue or even the president or even senior members, but just people, volunteers, who take this seriously enough to want to train themselves. So when they all go through the course, and they'll be able to see, it's more than just self-defense. We want to show them what happens if a terrorist or some kind of incident, somebody comes into the door. What happens if somebody comes into the front door and the back door at the same time? We teach them how to work in teams. So, example, what if somebody has to tag team a bad guy? What if someone has to learn to, part of the team may have to be able to secure, like, the sanctuary and then fight in the lobby, so nobody gets hurt. So it's really a comprehensive program, and it's best done in conjunction with physical security, maybe some electronic security, some cameras, some electronic locking devices on the doors, so people see who's coming in and who's coming out of their synagogue. So we try to combine all that physical knowledge of the premise as well as self-defense and combat shooting. Combat shooting is, so people don't get the wrong idea, but most people, even police officers, they learn to shoot at a target, a stationary target. It's not moving and you're not moving, which is rarely the case in a combat shooting incident. Usually you have, and you probably heard of the 21-foot rule, that oftentimes you can't even draw a weapon if somebody's rushing you at close quarters.
Sure.
They'll get to you before the weapon even comes out. So we have to train people that, you have to learn some hand-to-hand skills just because you might not even be able to get to your weapon right away. And it's not, yes.
Exactly.
And we also teach non-lethal weapons as well. You could have tasers, you can have pepper spray, you can have some kind of baton. So everything is not about hurting anybody or shooting anybody, but it's really about protecting ourselves and protecting the flock. So it's not any type of, I know Rabbi Moskowitz has gotten calls that people think you're some kind of vigilante or some kind of militia, but we're not.
Well, it could, I can understand that some people might level that accusation because it does sound kind of militant.
Well, I don't think anybody who went and trained in a martial arts school would call anybody who goes there a militant. There's millions of people out there, or at least thousands, who've trained in martial arts schools, have earned black belts. And in most martial arts schools, people are taught a code of ethics, how to behave, how not to use it, and, we teach the legal aspects of, self-defense, what you can do, what's lethal, what's not lethal.
I think people also need to do a little more research on exactly the kind of threats that there are against religious institutions, especially against shuls, synagogues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, part of what we do is, and what we teach, the people who come under our course to do, is try to team up with local police or watchdog units so who's possibly in your neighborhood or where the threat can possibly come from.
Exactly. To me, who lived through those two terrorist attacks and the 9/11, it makes a lot of sense to me to be prepared. But in any event, I thank you so much for coming on the show with me today. And I'm putting the links to your website on my Voice America host page, Stuart, on my Crime Prevention 101 website. So if anyone wants more information, they can get it from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure. All right, well, that's a wrap for now. But never fear, because you and I will be doing this again next week, same time. And next week I'm going to be talking about the theme of redemption of juvenile criminals. Back in 1989, a 13-year-old boy was found guilty of the burglary and rape of a 72-year-old woman. He already had an extensive rap sheet, even at that tender age, and he was judged incorrigible by a Florida court and sentenced to life in prison. Today, at age 33, he's challenging that sentence. Very knowledgeable panel of experts to help me discuss this, including an attorney who's fighting to free another juvenile, a psychologist whose son was murdered by a juvenile now serving life, and an ex-con who rehabilitated himself and now runs a program for kids in trouble. I think you're going to find this a particularly relevant subject, so stay tuned and stay safe.
We hope you got some useful information and inspiration this week on Crime Prevention 101. Susan Bartlestone invites you to join us again next Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Voice America. If you want to learn more about Susan's guest, sign up for her newsletter, or find out about upcoming teleseminars and workshops, go to www.crimeprevention101.com today. Have a great week and a safe week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.